𝗪𝗁𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗀. You miss me?
Oh yeah, Charles, we got ourselves an X-Men fan.
Captain.
Your Highness.
Captain, big fan, Spider-Man. Hey everyone.
Hey guys, and welcome to 𝗪𝗁𝗃𝗀𝗀, your #1 source for all things films and movies. And there's a ton of excitement around the upcoming Disney Plus show, Loki, as Loki was one of the original shows announced for Disney Plus, but the big question now is how will this show end up being and where will the plot end up going? And it's incredibly cool to see that we are finally going to be seeing this show release as we did with shows like WandaVision. One thing that's really cool is we've recently seen a lot of some new stuff along the way that we wanted to take a closer look, and also in general, Tom Hiddleston is pretty great at keeping spoilers to himself. He's been doing this for a really long time, various interviews and press tours when it comes to upcoming things, and while at times people might jump in and try to figure out some spoilers along the way, Tom Hiddleston has a pretty great track record at not revealing too much, though it doesn't stop sometimes him having to do some pretty massive misdirection tricks to avoid answering some questions, which is really interesting to take a look at. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at some of these moments from his press tour recently for Loki, where he had to kind of dodge some questions along the way. Right away, this is a common one that kind of has been coming up in a lot of discussions when it comes to Loki and the future of the Disney Plus series, where he does in an interview get asked about whether or not there will be a season 2 of Loki sometime in the future. And what he ends up doing is actually pretty clever. He just avoids the question altogether, doesn't answer, and kind of rambles off a little bit.
I loved making this. I really did. It was, it was because we made it in the course of the last year, and on the other side, well, we made it through the pandemic. It became everybody on the crew became very invested in each other because it was something we were very committed to. It
was a pretty good misdirection technique, and he continues to talk about the production and some of the setbacks along the way in this interview to kind of stall and buy him some time to still give a lot of information that the interviewer will be happy with, but while also avoiding some things. Though when he starts getting into some of the details as to some of the people he's worked with for the project, he ends up having to jump into another method of avoiding spoilers by skipping over some people's names that he maybe would have included when talking about the special people he worked with.
Every time we all go to work, you go to work with a group of people, and half the time it's everybody else's inspiration that gives you the energy that you need. And these people, Kate Herron, Michael Waldron, Eric Martin, Kevin Wright, Owen Wilson, 𝗪𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗃, Wunmi Mosaku, Sophia DiMartino, and more that I cannot mention at this point.
But in this specific interview, he didn't quite get away with it just yet, because then again, he gets asked if he could say anything about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and of course, once again, he kind of is forced just to leave it on a very ambiguous note.
So you're saying season 2 thumbs up?
I know, Steve, I know now, because I've played this role a while, and I've died 3 times, or maybe 2 or 2.5. I know now that for me to have any expectations about what happens next is a fool's errand, but I'm along for the ride.
So we already know Tom Hiddleston is quite a bit of a pro when it comes to dodging over some stuff for the television series Loki, and just with his vast knowledge of various things from the MCU. Though one thing that is really interesting is in another interview, he was asked directly about the plot and how it would tie in together to the other films in the MCU, specifically the ones that take place after the events of the Avengers split off, where Loki will be kind of taking place in. And what he ends up doing is really insightful, actually. He kind of spins it a little bit where he doesn't have to talk about specifics, but more talks about the audience's perspective. So in a way, he's answering the question while avoiding any specifics that would give things away.
Some of his confusion about where he is, or does that play into the plot at all? The fact that he might not have knowledge of some things?
Oh, absolutely. I think what's really interesting is that the audience broadly have a better perspective on Loki than Loki does. Because the audience have seen the events of The Dark World and Ragnarok, Infinity War and Endgame.
But first, we wanted to give a quick reminder, we do have a really awesome Instagram page that updates you guys on everything happening Marvel immediately. So if you guys want to follow us on Instagram, check it out, link in the description. There's also a ton of really awesome memes and other things that are posted on there. So make sure you guys are following that page, and let's go ahead and jump into this story. Now, on the flip side of things, it is really interesting because Owen Wilson, who is set to appear in this series as well, was also doing a press kit for Loki. And maybe he's learned a thing or two from Tom Hiddleston directly in avoiding spoilers, because he does a pretty good job most of the time about skipping over any specific plot details. Though at one point he may have kind of given out just a tiny bit more than he was supposed to in a recent interview where he talks about his role as a character and kind of lets it out that he at some point in the plot will be interviewing the Loki character and his background and history, and kind of knows a bit more about him than what might seem on the surface. It's not a massive spoiler, but it is really interesting that it popped up in the interview.
You know, telling me about it and telling me about his character, and even in the way sometimes that he would describe his character, it was useful for me because my character Mobius in Loki is kind of interviewing him at some point. So and so it kind of worked, kind of.
Then again, in another interview with Owen Wilson, he actually got to talk a little bit about the importance of the fan base and why they really have to keep things tight-lipped for Marvel projects. It's kind of interesting, as he's a newcomer joining up in the MCU, to hear his perspective on that type of talk.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's I've become very aware of how passionate the fan base is, and it's helped me to kind of understand why we went to all these measures to try to keep things secret, and the look of the characters and the story plot ideas, because people really want to find out.
So it is really cool to look at these interviews and see how so many times the person interviewing may directly or even accidentally try to get some of the plot revealed. And one thing that is really cool is that Tom Hiddleston was faced with a really unique question where he straight up didn't even have to answer, or it didn't have to be indicating anything that would actually happen in the series, but was asked if there was any cameo appearance he could pick to happen in Loki, who would it be? And it didn't have to be who it actually is. And he ends up pondering as to whether or not he even wants to answer this question for a while. This moment is actually kind of hilarious and funny along the way, because he really stumbles on it for quite some time and tries to think about how he can answer it, but also he doesn't want to reveal anything that would reveal any of the plot or even get him in trouble for suggesting something that maybe wasn't going to happen, that was going to happen, or just any possible things or possibilities down the road. So he kind of strays away with the question after a little bit of time.
So it's a curious one, because I do have someone in mind, but I think I'd rather keep the powder dry for everyone to find out.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah. Somebody once said to me years ago, or a couple of years ago, is Loki really dead?
But then again, another question in this same interview comes up that really causes him to struggle some more, where he was asked about the dynamic of Thor and Loki and Chris Hemsworth, while also kind of relating it back to the Loki series. And Tom Hiddleston starts to talk about a personal anecdote, talking about emailing Chris Hemsworth, which obviously is probably even more than he should even reveal, because it could possibly lead to fan theories that maybe there was some interaction beforehand. And we know that from seeing various interviews like this from back in other movies and Disney Plus releases, that any little detail will be run with and spiraled into some sort of rumor. So he tries to backtrack it some more and kind of talks about Chris Hemsworth doing his own thing in Thor Love and Thunder, but then of course he has to kind of abruptly just stop himself from revealing anything, because if he even insinuates one thing, like his involvement in a project, or even Chris Hemsworth's involvement in a project, or even the fact that these two actors have such a long history together, we know that fans would probably run out of control. So while it was a really awkward situation for Tom Hiddleston to be in, he did a pretty good job maneuvering this the best that he could.
Both Thor and Loki, they exist in the minds of each, it's interesting to think about. Like, even doing this series, I would email Chris, and because it was impossible not to kind of carry him in mind, because he's been on this journey with me, but he's got his own new family in Love and Thunder, and I'm pretty sure Thor's got his own challenges now.
So what do you guys think about Tom Hiddleston? And that is it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, do make sure you guys are subscribed with notifications on for more videos just like this one, uploaded every single day of the week. Also, leave a comment down below with what your expectations are out of this new Loki television series. Are you thinking it's going to be good? Do you think that Loki and Tom Hiddleston will continue the same caliber of acting that he has put into the character in the past? Let us know what your thoughts are. We're really curious to see what you guys think. Otherwise, that's it for today. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.